we've made this natural movement to the second part of your book, or the second layer of your book, that really distinguishes it from other culture war critiques in this genre, because you connect the dots and talk about how this perpetual adolescence connects with our perpetual identity crisis and makes us incapable, or certainly less able to fight the war against jihad that we're in right now. Talk to us a little bit more about how your book evolved in that way. You're thinking about the book before 9/11, you know, when you were, the seeds of it were just being planted, and afterwards.
Right. Well, the idea does go back to the Clinton years, poster boy for the perpetual adolescent. You know, kind of punky tastes, punky behaviors. It seemed like there was sort of a culmination in the Clinton years, the Clinton presidency, really. And what I originally envisioned as a book was sort of an explanation of how we got to 1996 or 1998. But things happened in my own life that I did not write the book. And I was so glad, because in the aftermath of 9/11, when the idea of writing a sort of cultural decline book was not very appealing, it suddenly hit me very hard that all the things I'd been thinking about in terms of that earliest notion of death of the grown-up actually had a very real-world application. And that's what put me on fire to write the book, because it struck me that we were suddenly not just discussing the so-called culture wars of the 80s and 90s. We were in a real culture war. But the lessons or the outcome of the culture war, which of course, I consider to have lost, the 80s and 90s culture war, with the rise of multiculturalism, or the establishment of multiculturalism and so on, I think had left us woefully unprepared to understand who we are and to understand who jihadists are. And the kind of leveling of cultural authority that you could say was the result of 50s and 60s changes that we talked about earlier, led to kind of this notion that we suspend judgment about the world, we become wholly inclusive, we become multicultural to the point where no culture is better than another, except for maybe Western culture being the great villain. So you flash forward to a situation where you're really in a cultural war, a clash of cultures. I think that's completely a valid way to describe what we're existing in. If you are non-judgmental, if you are all-inclusive, you are going to lose that culture war. It's not just over your Western canon, whether it survives, at Stanford or any other campus. It's about whether your liberty survives. So this is what the connecting the dots led me to start thinking about. And when I really started thinking about it, I realized that in some ways that loss of judgment that I think children are taught right from the beginning when they're exposed to undeveloped cultures that have, things that children find disgusting. I mean, I saw this in my own kids. They'd come home with tales of either American Indians or African tribes, some custom or food stuff that they would find disgusting. And they would always tell me, the children said, "Ooh, that's gross." And the teacher would say, "Don't say that, that's their culture." So the kids learn to repress their learned judgments. As you grow up doing that, all of a sudden you find yourself unable to condemn female genital mutilation because that's their culture, or even suicide bombing. That's coming out of their culture. It's their only way. So you find yourself constantly denying your identity, yourself, your set of values/virtues. I think virtues is a better word. But what you have been taught, even despite the multicultural establishment, to take to your apprehension, to your assessment of the world. So multiculturalism in many ways is a very infantilizing development, because it's telling you cannot make judgments or distinctions, even when it's harmful.
Right.
Not to.
You have a great illustration of this in your in your chapter on the real culture war, where I guess it was a week after September 11th, Ari Fleischer, then White House spokesman, was being grilled because President Bush had used the word crusade.
Yes.
Describe that scene.
looking back, it seems even more important than I thought it when I was writing about it.
Yeah, it really is suicide by 1,000 politically correct cuts.
It is.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning. It was days. It was days after 9/11, and the president said that something like, this war, this crusade is going to take a while. Sounds apt, sounds logical, but the word crusade set off everyone's PC meters up to 1,000.
Right.
And he was lambasted as boorish, cowboyish, insensitive. The Islamic countries, I don't know that they lodged formal protests, but there was certainly a great outcry against the use of the word because of the Crusades, the historical period 1,000 years ago, in which America, of course, actually was not even around to participate in, but was a historical period in which the Christian nations, Christendom, what we used to call Christendom in Europe, went to what is now known as the Middle East to try to stop the Islamic incursions on pilgrims and Christian communities in the Holy Land. Christendom lost. It's just a sidelight to all of this. But the use of the word crusade was supposed to be this terrible insult to Islam. And this, despite, it is our word, it is an English word, it is our understanding of what a crusade is just as much as it is anyone else's. And when you actually consider the use of the word, it is perfect. It is a long, principled fight against some enemy. Well, that's what the derivation is, that's what it is. And we have in our own history, we have Thomas Jefferson talking about crusade against ignorance. We have Colin Powell in his memoir talking about crusade against racism. We have the Avon Company crusade against breast cancer.
Right.
And of course, the first one that really came to my mind originally was Dwight Eisenhower's very important book after World War II called Crusade in Europe, which was not about the Crusades, it was about World War II.
Right.
So the word is a metaphor for an important, urgent fight. And the fact that the president caved on that and his spokesman retreated showed that we were willing to give up a piece of ourselves and not allow our understanding of ourselves and our perfectly noble fight to stand, and that we were going to define that fight according to the world out of which our enemy is springing.
Do you see any signs for hope or optimism?
Yes. No, I do. This sounds like a silly phrase, but I really do think we all have an inner grown-up. I really do. I think that most people have very good reactions. I think most people have a sound moral compass, but I think they've become cowed by media culture not to listen to themselves. Going back to the sort of cultural change, Death of the Grown-Up, Margaret Mead, I thought put it really well, and this was at least 50, 60 years ago, when she said, you know there's a change in the culture when a mother says to her daughter, what are the other girls doing? Not, when I was a girl, I ... Mm-hmm. That's a big shift. Mm-hmm. So when you realize that that shift has taken place, but there's just this little inner grown-up inside people that still understands what should be done, I think that is to be encouraged. I think that multiculturalism is something we need to discuss and debate anew. I think also that we need to stop being afraid. But I think all of these things are possible. I don't really think that we are low to a point of failure or defeat. And I take that mainly from the evidence of emails I get from across the country. I'm sure you get the same wonderful emails from people, mostly outside the Beltway.
Yes.
Our leadership class, I think, really, at this point, could be retired. And that goes for even top military brass. I mean, the top levels of our leadership, I think, are failing the very vibrant kind of junior officers, the very vibrant people out across the country who look at facts and think, I understand what's going on. Why can't our leaders say something? So I think it's just kind of to encourage us to not be afraid and to try to grow up.
And what a great note to end on. Diana West, thank you for your book. And I want to also personally thank you for helping me mature.
Oh my goodness,
the education
Michelle.
process, and particularly with your writings on jihad. You're one of the most eloquent and informed voices out there. And I highly recommend that you buy this book, The Death of the Grown-Up. How America's Arrested Development is Bringing Down Western Civilization. Diana, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.